Anti-abortion laws passed by almost a dozen Republican states in the United States have spurred protests slamming the regressive legislation. Georgia became the focal point of one such protest when people gathered in front of the state capitol. Protesters could be seen holding posters and placards slamming the new law and demanding the right to choose. Here's what one of them had to say.
When people argue that this is about being pro-life, it's really about anti-choice. If the legislature was concerned about life, they would have expanded Medicaid in Georgia. They wouldn't have the worst maternal mortality in the country.
Similar protests were also seen in the states of North Carolina and Florida, where protesters took to the streets with pro-abortion slogans. However, the supporters of the law decided to hold counter-rallies and the situation spiraled into a shouting contest on the roads. Some protesters got emotional, talking about the lack of empathy from male politicians, once again highlighting the seriousness of the issue.
When abortion access is under attack, when abortion rights are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back.
It's such like that you don't know what someone's been through, and like when in Alabama, when all of the males were voting on it and like not a single woman like voted to keep it passed, it's just like they're men and they don't know like what women have been through. So for them to vote on passing that law, it's not right.
In other news, top Trump government officials briefed divided Congress lawmakers on escalating tensions with Iran. Now, the delegation was led by the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, along with members of the intelligence community. Defense Secretary Shanahan said that while threats from Iran in the Middle East remained high, deterrence measures taken by the Pentagon had stalled attacks on Americans, a viewpoint reiterated by Pompeo.
Our strategic campaign.
Intelligence is borne out in attacks, and I would say it's also deterred attacks. We have deterred attacks based on our reposturing of assets, deterred attacks against American forces. Our biggest focus at this point is to prevent Iranian miscalculation. We do not want the situation to escalate. This is about deterrence, not about war. We're not about going to war. This is about continuing to protect our interests in the Middle East and conducting the missions that we are there to perform.
I've got a couple quick points about the conversations we had with the House and the Senate today, and then I'll turn it over to Pat. First, we shared with both the House and the Senate our strategic campaign, the effort to push back against Iran's malign activity, 40 years of terrorist activity. And so we talked to them about that. We tried to place the recent intelligence in context of that 40 years of history, and we walked through our efforts and our ultimate objective over the past days, which has been to deter Iran.
However, Democratic Senator Bernie Sanders implied that the officials had not told the truth comparing the situation with the Vietnam War.
Let me be very brief and say that I think, as most Americans know, way back when we were lied to about the situation in Vietnam, and we went into a war which ended up costing us 59,000 lives based on a lie. 2003, we were lied to in terms of Iraq supposedly having weapons of mass destruction. We lost over 4,000 brave Americans, and hundreds of thousands of people in the region were killed and forced to leave their homes. I believe that a war with Iran would be an absolute disaster, far worse than the war with Iraq. And I hope the American people tell this administration that we will not go to war in Iran.
Remember, the U.S. military has deployed a carrier strike group, bombers and Patriot missiles to West Asia in response to what Washington said were troubling indications of possible preparations for an attack by Iran.